Have you guys seen that trend on TikTok where a person is on a Zoom meeting and pretends to have bad Wi-Fi, whether they were not paying attention, oblivious to the answer, or refusing to engage in the conversation? This trick may not be so amusing for the receiver of the information, or can contribute to the overall effectiveness of this interaction. As we're all experienced, in 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic forced a drastic increase in the number of video conferencing meetings, which is a critical tool that allows schools to continue working during a pandemic. Video conferencing in 2020 saw a 535% rise in daily traffic through Zoom. Many classes have gone online, and we're beginning to ponder how it's changed the way that teachers and students communicate. So today I'll be exploring the psychological impact of online learning, particularly its implications on the means through which we communicate. So over the past few years, the immediate effects of online learning have been exacerbated during COVID-19, affecting our day-to-day communication. According to statistics from the New England Journal of Medicine, mass home confinement directives, including stay-at-home orders, quarantine, isolation, they raise concern about how people react individually and collectively. So an article from Translational Psychology states that 18 to 24-year-old groups in the US was the most heavily affected, with more than one half feeling moderate mental distress. Education has been limited to go online, with these students and teachers still sitting in the confined spaces of their rooms. So how has COVID-19 impacted our education? Well, the most obvious point is that the focus of online learning. It's much harder to be engaged virtually without body contact or being in the same room as other people. And this will contribute a lot to how communication changed when we use an online platform. So Ms. Zheng, the school counselor, has taught us SOLAR and peer mentoring. SOLAR is an acronym that stands for sitting squarely, open posture, leaning forwards, eye contact, and a relaxed body language. This is a method of actively listening to the people not only during counseling, but also in normal conversations, because we want to be heard and receive active visual or verbal feedback during a conversation. With our classes and meetings going online, SOLAR has been kind of compromised because all these nonverbal aspects of active listening fail to be transported across our Zoom screens. So today I'll be introducing studies that focus on nonverbal cues, such as eye contact and body language, and how those play a role in effective communication, both online and offline. So let's backtrack 50 years ago in the 1970s. The still face paradigm was discovered by American developmental psychologist Edward Tronick, who is a distinguished figure known for studies of infants and neurobehavior development. So in one of his studies, the researchers asked the mothers to play with their children, but suddenly switched to a still and blank face for 30 seconds, as shown on the slide. The results show that the babies quickly developed a negative reaction by screaming, pointing, and losing their posture from the stress, which is indicative of the level of sensitivity to attention. In recent years, we can see similar effects examined in the study, but in a much wider scale, specifically the small delay in response over Zoom video conferencing calls on a platform that we commonly use. Of course, we typically believe that as teenagers or adults, such extreme behavior to a lack of response would not be as frequent. But the researchers believe that this behavior is rather an innate response. So in other words, though we may have adapted to certain social situations, we will still have this response and need for attention kind of wired within us. But this lack of responsive stimuli from others, even for just a small amount of time, happens so often in our online learning. So let's look into this a little bit more. What implications does this still face paradigm have for today's young people who are studying over Zoom? So a study by GP, an associate professor at INSEAD in 2014, showed that silence on a call would pose yet another challenge in communication. So he states that silence creates a natural rhythm when it comes in real life conversation, but when it happens on a video call, you become very anxious about the technology. So similarly, a study showed that delays on phone conferencing systems shaped our views of people very negatively. So even delays of 1.2 seconds made people perceive the responder as less friendly or focused. So with long hours of Zoom and online learning, we have become increasingly uneasy. With this in mind, the frequent lagging and delay in visual and verbal feedback we experienced during online school would at least subconsciously make us uncertain and insecure about our interaction with other people. So here comes the real question. Is cameras on really a good thing? So with online interactions, the researchers and everyone alike assume that the closer technology-mediated interaction is a face-to-face interaction. So with the full range of nonverbal cues like visual, audio, and being in a physical environment, the better it will be at fostering a high-quality collaboration and communication between people. This is also something that schools and educators automatically assume, which is why us students and teachers are constantly required to have our cameras on during Zoom classes. But empirical research by researchers from Carnegie Mellon Tepper School of Business and the Department of Communication at the University of California, Santa Barbara, suggests that the visual cue availability, which is when we have our videos on, this may not always be better than audio cues alone. So when we have our videos off. So in the absence of the visual cues, such as when we have our videos off, they found that communicators can effectively compensate, seek social information, and develop relationships in technology-mediated environments. This means we can still maintain good communication despite not seeing the other person on our screen. The study also shows that when interacting partners have audio cues only, so when they have their videos off, the lack of video does not hinder them from communicating these rules, but instead help them to regulate their conversation more smoothly by engaging in the more equal exchange of turns. So this study underscores the importance of audio cues, which appear to be compromised by the video access. So in other words, videos on may in fact be detrimental to our communication over Zoom. And another reason is that being on a video call requires more focus than a face-to-face chat. So video chat means that we have to work harder to process nonverbal cues like facial expressions and body language. So paying more attention to these consumes a lot of our energy. So GP says, and I quote, "Our minds are together when our bodies feel we're not. That dissonance, which causes people to have conflicting feelings, is exhausting. So we cannot relax into the conversation naturally." But don't get me wrong, they did find that facial expressions play more of a social role and partners jointly attended to them. But more importantly, the findings also suggest that video access may in fact impede the development of dynamic social coordination and conversation by creating greater speaking turn inequality, which is when we are unsure of when to speak up on a Zoom call because of the increased difficulty to read the visual cues on the video conditions, such as when we see the other person having to look at the whole screen, so the whole group of people, instead of making direct eye contact with us. So this counters some prevailing assumptions about the importance of virtual media to facilitate collaboration and communication. So what can schools do and what can we do as students to minimize the stress we experience on Zoom? So I asked for some of my teachers' opinions on whether cameras should be on or off, and they said that cameras let teachers know that students are attentive, but I think we should all consider and understand that having them on may be overwhelming and uncomfortable for some people because of the large amount of visual information we have to process. So establishing a delicate balance between having our cameras on and off will be beneficial to both students and teachers. So as a whole, I believe the decision as to whether to use video technology should be made based on the specific demands of the learning exercise being set and whether it will specifically benefit from visual interaction. So one question is, will students be distracted with cameras off? We do need to consider some of the issues caused by turning cameras on though. So I proposed a hybrid model, which in a lesson, we will alternate between cameras on and off. So for example, in a larger group call, we can have our cameras on for momentary check-ins after individual work sessions. But in smaller group discussions, we should consider that it might work to have cameras off to facilitate the speaking turn. So we will be more comfortable speaking up with our cameras off. So we could use the hands up sign reactions or create some other systems that will allow students and teachers to have good amounts of cameras off time. But overall, paying attention to student and teacher feedback on virtual classes would be a lot more important since this research may not be 100% applicable to our school. Online learning has become a necessity in recent years, so it does need a lot more further research to ensure that everyone can have a more comfortable and smooth virtual experience. As we continue to navigate the world of online learning, we begin to realize that a virtual platform is a different place and it has its own rules. We found that trying to mimic the experience in real life virtually, so by consistently having our cameras on, is not necessarily beneficial to our communication. So therefore, we should be consistently interrogating the virtual world's impact on our learning experience. Thank you guys for listening and have a great evening. Bye.